Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thanks again for joining us today at the Accessible Inclusive Design Conference, session number 2. And this particular session, I think, is going to be a great follow-up to the last session with Diane and Amy. And it is hosted by, the presenter is Dr. Bello Miguel Cipriani, who I've had the pleasure of interviewing on a TLD cast a few months ago. Absolutely. I just can't say enough about how much he has influenced me in wanting to produce events like this and to focus more on accessibility. And Bello is a digital inclusion strategist, an author, and the CEO of Olib Media. He has a slide deck that I'm going to be helping him with today. So I'll be bringing that up in a moment. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started. Ola, why don't you go ahead and test your audio now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome.
All right, so let me go ahead and proceed once the share comes up. All right, everyone, if you could just let me know if you can see that, see the slides in front of you. All right, thanks, Miriam. Thanks, Lisa. All good. We're getting lots of thumbs up on the screen. So, Bello, first slide we have is the title slide, Assistive Technology Users Understanding the Representative Range.
Awesome. That's pretty self-explanatory. But I do want to just share with the audience that I am blind, and so Luis is going to be my proxy, helping me read some of the slides out loud, since I didn't want to have you guys all listen to my screen reader at this point. So thank you all for working with us here as we collaborate. Next slide, Luis.
Next slide, the title is Becoming an Assistive Tech User. And in quotation marks, it says trigger warning. And it has a book cover, Blind, a memoir.
So I am a qualitative researcher. I focus my work's a lot on case studies, and my emphasis is on adaptive technology users, people who use magnifiers, screen readers, sip and puff, mouse pedals. They use mouse sticks. These are just a handful of items that they use. And my research comes from my own experience of becoming blind. And so I will talk about this. I'm very comfortable in talking about my vision loss. As you could tell, I even wrote a book about it. But I just wanted to let some of you know that, I do share a little bit of the trauma that led to my blindness, and just, a trigger warning. Next slide, please.
The title of the slide is Assistive Tech Training, and there is an image of an individual with, I believe it's a bag with a keyboard of some type. I'm sorry, I don't know.
It's a Braille display.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, and for those of you who may not know be familiar with a Braille display, a Braille device, it's a device that connects to a computer via USB port and allows people to input Braille symbols, as well as sometimes have an output. There's like little pin needles that move on a screen, kind of like I kind of think of it like they dance. They move around to shape words. It's a really cool technology, very expensive, and that's what this image is here. And I'll have you read this slide too, Luis.
Sure. In 2007, the only way to get assistive tech training in San Francisco was through nonprofits and government agencies. I waited 6 months to get funded through the Department of Rehab and opted to do a 3-month intensive residential training. In 2022, while there are assistive tech blogs and free online videos, for someone with no assistive tech experience, reaching those communities is challenging. Thus, getting training through rehabilitation programs is still how most beginners get started.
Thank you. What I want to say about the slide and share my story, go into my story a little deeper, is that I lost my sight very quickly. I lost my sight as a result of an assault. So I lost my vision within days. And prior to losing my sight, I was working in Silicon Valley. I was leading tech teams. And, I went from someone who managed, teams of, 20, 30 people on various projects to someone who could not even shop online. And even with my degree in computer science, all my tech training, I could not jumpstart my career and get the assistive technology training that I needed to become independent. I had to wait like many people, 6 months. Some waited longer to get funded just because this training is so highly specialized, it's so expensive. And even though it's, there's blogs and websites that kind of give tutorials and things, getting started is just so challenging for someone with no background. Next slide, please.
Ken, I'm going to mention here real quick. I've got a request to go with to presenter mode on the slideshow. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and get that going. All right. All right, let me move this here. Okay, this next slide, the title is Assistive Devices and Products.
Can you read it, please?
Oh, yes. Like assistive tech training, assistive devices and products are not easy to obtain. They're costly and often require setup by a trained professional. Some common assistive devices and products are computer with screen reader, braille display, foot mouse, trackball mouse, mouse stick.
I touched on this earlier, but just to kind of reiterate that a lot of the devices that people need to, take an online class, do online shopping, things that are considered essential are very expensive. And often people need support to purchase them. When I lost my sight, I was making a six-figure income. And even with my six-figure income and my savings, buying some of the software was just not an option for me. I think the Braille display at that time in 2007 was like $9,000. I think my whole setup cost about $33,000. And even with my income at that time, it was something I couldn't just do. And so that the other, barrier that assistive technology users have is not just accessing the training, but also accessing the devices that they need to train on. Next slide, please.
Next slide, the title is The Disconnect Between Compliance and Training. There is an image of three individuals sitting, and the text says, in 2008, I was hired by a small tech consulting company. During my new employee orientation, I listened as my colleagues who were starting this journey with me got manuals, tutorials, and access to support staff through the tech vendor who could answer tech questions. My requests for help with assistive tech help were met with, it's compliant. In 2022, I still hear the same answer when asking for tech tips at masterminds, webinars, and workshops.
I want to just circle back to this idea that, just because someone is an assistive tech user doesn't mean that they're an advanced user. Or it doesn't mean that they don't need support. I was actually on a webinar a couple of days ago, and I was listening to the speaker say, "Hey, here's some tech tip. Here's some tech tips. If you need help, here's download this PDF." And again, when I say, "Is there anything on screen readers?" that all I got was the compliant. So there's this disconnect where people who are assistive technology users don't need support. And in fact, we're just, at the end of the day, we're just people. We get lost. We may forget how to use the tool. We may need a refresher. And so I just want to, that's really the nugget that I'm bringing here, is that there's this disconnect with training professionals, learning instructional designers, that screen reader users, if something's compliant, they should be able to figure it out on their own. And this is the gap that I've identified through my research. Next slide, please.
Title of this slide is Becoming an Accessibility Scholar, and the text reads, oh, and there's an image of Bello with a lovely dog, a black dog. Let's see. Text reads, after being let go from 4 jobs in 1 year for not producing, a result of running into tech issues and not being supported, I went to grad school and focused my doctoral research on improving the experiences of assistive tech users.
For me, people tend to want to share, especially with social media, their successes, right? But for me, all these failures led to success just because I kept getting fired from jobs, and I had every job you can imagine, startups. I even worked for a newspaper. And their whole goal was, hey, we made this accessible, it's compliant, you need to figure it out on your own. And I was not meeting my deadlines. I was spending 6-7 hours outside of work to train myself and figure out how to use things, while all my colleagues had all the support under the umbrella. And this, on paper, it looked as though I was not producing. They gave me accessible work, accessible products, and the reality was that some of these products were not accessible, even though they claimed to be. But B, there was no support for me. I was on my own, constantly having to train myself. And so, after being let go from 4 different jobs, I said, there's got to be a solution. There's got to be a way to make this, more accessible. I'm in Silicon Valley, and my staff are some of the smartest techies in the world, and they're not sure how to support me. And so I kind of looked at it as an opportunity, right? Turn my my lemons into a lemonade, and this is what set me off on the path that I am today. Next slide, please, Luis.
The slide title is Understanding the Representative Range, and the text reads, the users of assistive tech will fall under one of these categories when using a digital property or across all tech products and services. First bullet point, novice user, about 30% of the disability community. Second bullet point is specialized user, about 60% of the disability community. And the third bullet point is advanced user, about 10% of the disability community. Each user profile has 3 levels, and many individuals will move between each profile as technology changes.
Thank you. I came up with this model after many years of doing qualitative researchers, running service online. One of my service, I got to survey 1,300 assistive tech users, and so I've been really honing in on what each profile means and how it works. And this model allowed me to really identify where someone is in their assistive tech journey and how to best support them. Something that I do want to point out is that most assistive technology users fall under the specialized user, meaning that they're used to using certain apps, certain devices, and once you put them in a different environment, it's like they're starting from scratch. An example of this is, for me, I had a master's in writing, and I did that as a blind person, so I was very good with word processing. When I went to get my doctorate in education, I had to take statistics. I did not know, these math programs, and so I was a specialized user going into these math programs, and I was basically starting from scratch. And so that's just one example, but there are many. A lot of people who use assistive technology on a daily basis do it a lot for online shopping, so they might be good on the web, but if you get them into a very specific app, they might just need more help. And so these 3 tiers kind of help anyone who runs a website, an instructional designer, a teacher, a coach, a small business owner, look to see where someone might be depending on what they're asking. Again, these profiles could actually change on a per property. So what I mean by that, let me take a step back and unpack that, is that I am probably an advanced user when it comes to word processing tools. I'm really good on the web, but when it comes to things that are design or very math focused, I'm probably a specialized user. I could use some, but very few. Put me on because of my disability, when it comes to video editing and production, I'm probably a novice user in those platforms. And so I'm just in presenting this model as a way to understand where people might be and the type of services, how you could best support somebody in any of these tier systems. Next slide, please.
Okay, title is The Novice User, and text says an individual with limited access to the assistive technology needed to access information.
This is just the basic the basic description of a novice user. And what I would say about novice users is that sometimes they're novices because they can't access the device or the technology for various reasons. A lot of them being cost prohibitive, like I've mentioned before. An example of a novice user could be somebody who cannot afford a laptop with a screen reader or whatever assistive device they might need. And so they only have access to it when they go to school, when they're at their university, or may have to go to a public library to access it. Regardless of what their situation is, their experience is limited, and so that they can't enhance their skills because they're starting from scratch each time they use the device. Next slide, please.
Title of this next slide, the specialized user, and then the text reads, an individual well-versed with a specific type of technology. In order to be successful, they must find digital properties that mirror the environments they're used to navigating.
I touched on this earlier. I used the example of someone who's used to using maybe just doing online shopping or using word processors, put them in a different environment, they will face many challenges. They may not know how to find things intuitively. The layout may throw them out. Also, something to note is for assistive tech users, the commands that you use to execute change. I'll use the Microsoft Word as an example, the products, how you work around Excel and PowerPoint, and even Word, there's some similarities, but there's specific commands for each product. And so, someone who's used to using one product may come into something similar, but may not know how to execute the shortcut keys and may need help in doing that. Next slide, please.
Next slide. Title is the advanced user. And the text reads, an individual who has access to different forms of assistive tech and enjoys the challenge of learning new tools and environments.
So an advanced user, will probably have a laptop, a desktop, multiple, assistive tech devices, and just really enjoys tech. Again, they're, about 10% of the population. We don't really, at least for myself as someone who's worked as an instructor in higher ed, as someone who runs retail sites, I don't encounter them very often. They're pretty self-sufficient. However, I do want to note is that as instructional designers, content creators, web developers, as you're testing your products, you want to make sure that you have a representative range, that you're not just using advanced users for your testing, because then the accessibility of it might be skewed. It'll be really targeted to an advanced user, not a specialized user. So for that reason, whenever I do audits of websites, content courses online, I make sure that I have specialized users, novice users, and some advanced users to make sure that, I'm not tailoring the accessibility towards the users who are more advanced in their assistive tech skills. Next slide, please.
Bello, can I ask you a question? And I sort of want to just let the audience in on this one. You have gone above and beyond to be able to use this particular platform, AirMeet. I mean, quite honestly, it's been somewhat of a nightmare behind the scenes. For instance, like your camera wasn't working today, and we feel like there's some compatibility issues possibly there, and just generally the way that AirMeet is constructed is not very accessible at all to screen readers. But can you relate that at all to this spectrum that you've just presented in the last 3 slides?
Absolutely. So for instance, I consider myself an advanced user. I know front-end development. I have many devices and laptops. As Luis noticed, we were switching computers this morning. And so, for me, if an advanced user has all these tools and they cannot independently access a platform, there's some serious accessibility issues. Just to give the audience more information, my business partner, James, who's also my husband, he had to, he's also visually impaired. We had to switch between our computers and do different things. And we finally got me on, but we couldn't get the camera going. So from that perspective, yeah, if an advanced user is struggling, is having this many issues, there's definitely something up with the platform, because most advanced users will make it work somehow. But it shouldn't be this labor intensive, right? And so if you come across an advanced user and they get themselves on there, but it took them a while, that's a red flag that there's some serious problems with the content / website / product.
Right. And honestly, that alone, I mean, just the experience of listening to you and James troubleshooting and trying to navigate through the interface is an incredible learning experience for me. Just because I could hear your screen reader and just kind of how you're processing everything. So, no, I really appreciate the opportunity. Okay, I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, title of this slide, How to Support Different Levels of Assistive Tech Users. And the text reads, the three-step approach to supporting an individual struggling with a digital task that has been verified to meet WCAG 2.1 level AA criteria is through the awareness, acceptance, and action model.
Sure. Next slide.
Title of the next slide is Awareness. It says Awareness. And the text reads, knowing the different levels of assistive technology users makes it possible for content creators and for those providing accommodations to offer the right level of support for an individual.
Okay. Next slide, please.
Acceptance. The title reads Acceptance. For many reasons, an assistive tech user may not be ready to expand their tech skills. This means that no number of resources will be helpful for them if they are not in the right mindset.
This is probably the most important part for any assistive tech user. We can't know everything. Just to give you, the audience, an example, I use JAWS. There are over 300 JAWS commands. I probably know about 50 to 60 off memory. The rest, I'll have to look them up when I need them. There's been times where there's a new app, a new platform, and I'm 10 minutes into it, and I have to accept that, if I want to be good at this app, I'm going to have to retrain myself, and I don't have the time to do that. So that's what I mean by acceptance is, in higher education, I had students that would want to take my class who were assistive tech users, and I would tell them, how are your word processing skills? Can you do track changes? Can you do this? Can you do that? And if you are not able to do that, you need to go get those skills. You have to, there's that awareness that, I need to polish up on my skills in order to be successful. And also the acceptance is, I don't have to do this. This is not the right time. I did this recently for an online programming class I wanted to take. I just realized I wouldn't have the time to relearn all these shortcut keys within 3 days before the class started. I thought that was unrealistic, so I had to accept that I will take it next summer, and hopefully over the next year I'll get those skills that I need to be successful. So this is really the acceptance, where it's important to either help someone understand where they're at, or let them do that on their own. Next slide.
Slide title says Action, and text reads, short list of approaches to supporting multiple levels of assisted tech users. And there's an ordered list. Number 1, provide multiple file formats, PDF and RTF. Number 2, provide multiple ways for an assistive tech user to contact your organization. Number 3, provide a quick guide for assistive tech users. Number 4, create a tour course for assistive tech users. And number 5, create an accessibility resources page on your site.
So I'll just kind of dive deeper into each one of these. And so, I know that it's common. People, PDFs are probably the most common file format people, offer as a download. However, some programs, don't make those make PDFs hard to read. An example of that is Canva. Their PDF formatting is a little off, right? And so if you don't have time to test all of your PDFs, and if you just offer a rich text file, someone cannot access the PDF. They'll just go to the RTF file and they still have access. And so, what I presented here are ways, different levels of access. A novice user may not, novice users find PDFs hard to use because they have to maybe update their Adobe Acrobat or install it, or sometimes they can't because it's not their computer. And so they would gravitate toward the RTF. And again, if there's something problematic with the PDF, someone would just use the RTF. The key here is, the key term is work stoppage. You want to make sure that people are moving throughout the day. They don't have a total stoppage where they can't move forward with whatever they were doing. The next bullet point, I think it was have different ways, allow for different ways for people to contact you. I would say that one of the reasons why a lot of companies have so many accessibility problems on their website is because their contact forms are inaccessible. This just happened to me yesterday, where I found this app. I thought it was going to be really easy to use, and there's just a couple of problems. But how I report the bugs is through a form that had a CAPTCHA on it that I couldn't I couldn't read what the picture said. And so I wasn't able to report the accessibility issue. And so that's probably, the biggest problem with improving accessibility is companies make reporting them tough to do, and they don't get reported. So they're not, captured. And so, yeah, having different ways for people to contact you. I work with a lot of people in the e-commerce space, and they often, push back and say, Bello, we can't have, people contact my staff directly. This is not, a customer service, job department. And what I tell them is, even if you just say, if you're an assistive tech user or a person with a disability who has problems, create a special email, accessibility@xcompany.com, and just make sure that you state in your verbiage, in your writing, that this is only for people with disabilities. And that's one way of offering a workaround that's not gonna exhaust your resources. I think we talked about offering quick guides. Often you could get these for free from your vendors. Some vendors offer these to their clients. You may not have to produce them. Sometimes you'll find someone, a lot of universities produce these tutorials, like, JAWS and a piece of popular software. So there's places to get them for free, and offering them to your customers. For instance, if you're teaching a class on, writing marketing copy, for example, and you say, hey, here's a tutorial on the quick guide with JAWS. If you're a JAWS screen reader user, here's the quick guide that you could download. And I think the next one was have like a tour of a course, a demo that people could test to see if they could actually use their assistive technology with it. That's been very popular. And for many of my e-commerce clients, it's proven to be almost like a lead generation magnet, because people are trying out the course and they like them, then they end up selling more. And I think, did I cover all the things in the list?
One more, create an accessibility resources page on your site.
Yeah, and that's pretty self-explanatory. The thing is to make sure it's updated regularly. I would say updating your resource list, accessibility resource list, once a year is a manageable task. Just updating the links, updating, the downloads, making sure that, the version of software being mentioned are still relevant. And, it's been, at least for me, it's been so much easier when I'm trying to do something and someone points me to a resource. I get the refresher I need, and then I'm able to move forward with, my online course, my purchase, my entertainment too. And so I think that we've wrapped up. I think we're at maybe the last slide.
Yeah, well, I think the last slide is the next one. I do want to mention, this is a great screen grab for anybody if you want to grab this one. This will, this is an excellent slide. I'll go ahead and go to the final slide. Okay, and the title says thank you. And the text says the content in this presentation has been excerpted from an upcoming course OLED Media will release in the fall of 2022 titled Accessibility Support Services, How to Provide Accommodations to Assistive Tech Users. For more information, please sign up for our newsletter at www.olebmedia.com.
Well, I'm open to answering any questions if there are any.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead. I do see that there are questions. Let me I'll leave this slide open so that folks can see the URL, but just jumping into the slides here. Okay, let's see here. First question. This one's from Meredith Gonzalez. Meredith is asking, my husband is blind and entering into the tech world. What does your setup include in its entirety? And she includes an email address to send to her, but maybe you can just talk about that a little bit.
Sure. It really depends on the type of work he's going to do. I have a Android, Mac, and Windows set up, and it's always nice because if something doesn't work with one platform, I could sometimes move over. So having that option is good, especially since inaccessibility or lack of accessibility is so prominent in certain tech spaces. For example, in the startup space, you're working with early projects, and so sometimes they haven't worked out the accessibility piece. So if he's able to afford having one system and a backup system, I think that would be essential. Maybe Windows and then getting an Android. Android systems are a lot more affordable than Macs. But if she sends me an email, I could give her a more detailed response.
Okay, what's your email address, real quick?
bello@olebmedia.com.
Okay, all right, Meredith. Hopefully you got that. So let me go ahead and move on to the next one. Pooja is asking, what is an alternative to CAPTCHA?
There is an accessible way. So obviously the option I talked about was just an image, but you could actually see, do the checkbox. I'm not a robot. The checkbox is accessible to screen readers. Just the plain image on its own is not. And there's some that are like the image, and then it says get an audio challenge. The audio challenge is hard to hear. Often it's a disembodied sound, and it's tough. So the most accessible way would be to offer a checkbox.
Nice. Okay. And sort of the final one in the QA area is from Kaylin Doherty. Kaylin posted, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your advocacy and innovations.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see. And I believe that is it. Oh, wait, let's see. Oh, I actually am getting a couple more here. I saw one. Okay, Nick Tellum is asking, I am on a crusade against drag and drop questions for assessments. What would you recommend?
We do a lot of this work, right? And it really depends on the curriculum. We've done this for like a business course, and we ended up offering, we offer different solutions depending on the content. I don't like that feature either. I think it's very problematic. I also think that it really depends on the course content. We have a newsletter through my company called the Digital Inclusion News, and it's a monthly newsletter. And I'm actually working on this very blog post for next month. So if you sign up for a newsletter, we'll be able to share some content ideas in regards to that.
All right. And I believe, let's see. Oh, okay. Here we go. We have another one that just came in from Claudine. And Claudine's asking, how did you even know where to begin when discovering what assistive tech was available to you?
It was luckily for me, I was in San Francisco when I became blind. And so they had some good nonprofits local to me. So I ended up learning about the different options at the Lighthouse for the Blind, which is just the local blind center. But even though I knew what I needed, I couldn't purchase it because it was, like I said, again, so expensive. I think even just the most basic thing I needed would have cost me a couple thousand, maybe close to 10. So yeah, it was definitely I learned about the tech that I needed through the local blind center in San Francisco.
Nice. Okay, Mark has answered. And let's see. Anything else come in? Okay, let's see. And let's see. I'm going to just show it looks like Maureen is following up to an earlier question. Maureen mentions drag and drop, hotspot, identify highlight area, all problems for assessments.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, I think also, the gamification, and some of these very popular video tools have a lot of issues with it too.
Right. Oh, we've got another question from Pooja here. Thanks for an informative session. Question: what is a good way to ask participants about their level of experience with assisted technology? In other words, how universal are the levels you shared with us?
I started using this model about maybe 5 years ago, and it's been helpful not just to be able to support, individuals, but also even for myself, so I've been able to go into a space and say, hey, I'm a novice user when it comes to this. I need a lot of help. Does your school / university / company offer this type of support? So it's helped me a lot on that level. I think that most of the individuals that I surveyed, I think I'm at about 3,000 have come across in the UK, Canada, in the US. I haven't really surveyed anyone outside those countries, and so I couldn't speak to those experiences. But I do say that it's consistent that technology is expensive, training is expensive, and those barriers allow keep people from working on their skill set. I do also want to share that, with at least with the different levels that I presented, someone could go through these in and out all the time. We all have skills gaps, and we all have, we all get comfortable when technology changes. So some people could be advanced users, and could drop down to a specialized user if they don't keep their skills up. My goal with presenting this model is to show that there's different levels of assistive tech user. So just because something's compliant doesn't mean that a user is gonna, intuitively know how to use it right away. My other goal with presenting this model is assistive tech users, we're people, we have needs too. We need training, we have skills gaps. How can we be supported in learning environments? And so that's really the goal. With presenting these models is showing a way, that's realistic to what the problems are.
Thank you for that. All right, let me go ahead and mark that as answered. Let's see, any other questions pop up? Oh yeah, here we go. We've got one more question from Pooja. Are Likert scale polling questions good or bad? Hopefully I pronounced that right. Likert scale.
Yeah, no, those could be made accessible. There's, that's not problematic. What I'm seeing with testing that's been problematic are, like the gamification, the images, like what is wrong with this picture, which are very common in, employee training. There's sometimes there's a video content that has no transcripts. Transcripts are something that I think a lot of instructional designers forget to incorporate. I think is a video transcript in addition to an audio transcript makes a big difference. I often, if I know there's a video transcript, I won't hit play. I will just access the video transcript because it's more digestible for me that way.
Okay, great. And let's see, I've got another question here. This one's from Jesse Dubler. The question is there a good way to offer two different pathways or approaches to e-learning, one with drag and drop while the other pathway with identical content without this? Is that a good practice?
I really discourage the whole that was the popular 10 years ago. That's how you handle things. You was like, here's the accessible version, and here's the you know the version that doesn't have access features on it. And I think that worked for a while, but then the problem that you run into is that then you're supporting two different things when you could just support one. I do believe in universal design for learning. I believe in digital inclusion, and I think there are ways that you could design your class that you know can be of use to many people. I will say that there's no such thing as like 100% accessibility. You could get pretty close, and I think that's what some organizations shoot for. Is like, how can we makes this the most accessible to the most number of people, and then offer either workarounds or support um, approaches to specific users. I taught an online class, and I had for the first time deaf blind students in a writing class that I taught, and I had to you know shift my content a little bit, but not a whole lot. And it was those changes that I made for those students was actually just adding a lot more transcripts or more offering different file formats, and it really didn't just benefit them, it benefited everyone. So um, I would really discourage anyone from creating two versions, an accessible one and one without accessibility features, because then you're going to run into the problem of trying to maintain both of them, and it could get pretty intense.
Right, and I do want to mention there are a couple users in the chat area that were saying that they have eliminated drop and drag, like Joan and Donna both. So that's worth considering. Let's see here, Mark answered. Okay, and let's see. No other questions are popping up, so I'm going to go ahead and close the share. So it's just our images up on the screen. Bello, I really appreciate you doing this session. I know we had a lot of challenges with this interface, and I am happy to say that I've had a few conversations with AirMeet where after this one wraps, they do want to talk about some of the feedback that Bello that you provided me to give to them. We're setting up a meeting to talk about it because they do need to improve their interface. They're really missing out on an opportunity to be more accessible and have and be able to support more users. So I appreciate that, and I just really I'm glad that you were able to power through this one, because we AirMeet has been a bit of a challenge. They're trying, and we'll see. But if it doesn't improve next year, we'll definitely be using a different platform to support this event. So Bello, just one last time, if you could just let people know how to get in touch with you. I highly recommend everyone connecting with Bello. He's just a fabulous individual and very inspiring.
Yeah, thanks, Luis. People could visit my consulting company's website at olebmedia.com. That's OLEB media.com. And yes, it's my name in reverse. And people could email me at bello@olebmedia.com. I am on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, and Instagram and Facebook. People could just put my name into those platforms and look me up. But I would say, contacting me via my consulting website would probably be the quickest.
And I am going to mention Kayleen did post a link to the conversation we had earlier this year, Bello and I, and I highly recommend checking that out, because we had Bello on screen using a screen reader, and it was really, I mean, it was an incredible learning experience for me, just witnessing that. So I can't recommend that enough. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and close up the session. Bello, James, thanks again for powering through all of this, everyone. We'll see you in the next session. We've got Judy Katz, who's going to be talking about neurodiversity. So stick around another 13 minutes or so, and we'll get that one going. Thanks, everybody.